All right, hello everybody, and welcome back to Spincast. My name's Kyle Taylor, and I have Keegabyte with me. He's an excellent caster and production manager for Rocket League and a host of other things. So we'll get right into it. I'm gonna let you go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell everybody about yourself, how you took your passion in gaming and morphed it into a professional career, and all those steps in between.
Well, hello everybody. My name is Keegabyte. As Kyle just so eloquently put it, I have been involved in the esports scene for a long, long time. I am currently a professional caster and production manager for Rocket League, but in addition to a whole bunch of other esports that I currently dabble in. I got my start in casting and production specifically 5 years ago when I became a caster and head of production for the Collegiate Battlegrounds Association. So the collegiate sphere is where I got my start, and as such, I am kind of in a unique place from a production perspective because collegiate is kind of an awkward ground for where you want to be in esports. It's not at the younger level, but it's not at the like pro level either. So there's a lot of like variation as to where that is. We'll get into that later, I'm sure, because there's going to be a bunch of things that are unique about that give my situation a bit more weight to it, simply because of the challenges that I've had to deal with coming from that background. But as for my start in esports in general, I started playing various esports when I was I think 9, actually, back in 2003 to 2005 area. I started out actually running time trials on Mario Kart DS, and I got very good at it. So I eventually started playing in tournaments, and then my love of esports just kind of sprung from there, and I started finding more serious games to get into, and now here we are today.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, I think everyone, once you hit that one game, you might have been Mario Kart DS, and it just sparks it, and you just get that feeling like I want to be better than everybody else. And you use that passion and drive to get you to that next level and keep climbing from there. So I know you talked about your production, and you produced events and casted for events in a number of different spheres, right? Collegiately, professionally, in a multiple different formats. So take us through that production perspective. Take us through some of those challenges you came across in different spheres of esports, because there are very unique spheres. Whether you're trying to cast or produce for a high school event or a collegiate event, or for a professional, this is the top of this game, or somewhere maybe like the tier 2 of that particular game. So take us through what goes through your head when you're designing and developing these tournaments and events.
Well, first of all, a distinction to be made there is that those spheres are, unfortunately, in the current esports climate, they're almost entirely separate. They shouldn't be. They should be overlapping in the middle. We should have Venn diagrams of spheres where, high schoolers are more consistently playing with pros back and forth, similarly to how most major North American sports are currently implemented, where you start out at middle school, high school, pros, college pros, and how it works from there. Unfortunately, they're all mostly separated because, quite frankly, with esports, a lot of the time, the most skilled players are coming from like that 16 to 18 range of like age range. So a lot of our high schoolers who are already fantastic at esports are already playing in that pro sphere and in that pro spectrum. So it's it's rather difficult to actually get an overlap with them when you have it's like, well, I can already play here, why shouldn't I just go play at the pros? But there are unique challenges to each one of them, not just in terms of production, but in terms of players and how to manage them. Um, so at the high school level, the players are the key, right? At that point, they're kids. They're in high school. They're trying to finish their diploma. They're trying to maintain and learn a healthy work and life balance. And that is something that at that point can be very, very challenging for youth who are currently trying to get into the esports realm. It was challenging for me when I was that age too. I had some problems occasionally, but it's important at the high school level that the parents be involved at every single stage of the development of their young student athlete. And that's exactly what esports athletes are. They are student athletes. Don't take it any less seriously than you would football. The same
Yep.
amount of hours of practice are put into it. The same amount of time and effort and dedication is put into it from all of the student athletes who play at the high school and collegiate levels. It's just that you don't see it as much because they're not outside playing, throwing a football around. They're inside whipping a controller around. So
Exactly.
and you might consider that as lazy, but quite frankly, they're expending so much mental effort. They're probably more tired than your average football player when they come back. But the production range follows similar issues from the high school front. You have to be considerate to the players that you're dealing with. So you have to schedule events to only run a certain amount of time. You can't have them be too long. And sometimes that means making sacrifices in overall production quality, but at that level, the players absolutely come first.
Yep. 100%.
Collegiate, yeah, collegiate is actually where I'd say that production has the most capability for freedom, but there's a problem with that. A lot of companies and a lot of organizations don't want to support the collegiate space because that's not where the money is. But so it's a weird area where there's so much room for production freedom. There's so much room for sponsorships. There's so much room. It's like these players, they're in college.
Hmm.
College, it's a place for learning, yes, but it's also a place where people discover themselves, where they can have a little bit more fun, a little bit more freedom. And quite frankly, a lot of colleges, a lot of college kids don't get a lot of sleep anyway. So most of the
Hmm.
time, they're up practicing their desired esport. I'm not saying that's correct of them. They still have to try and focus on a healthy work life schedule, but at the same time, there's a lot more freedom for the collegiate space. Um, and it's unfortunate that we don't have the resources in the collegiate space now where we need them to get these revolutions in production going for esports, because esports overall has a problem with production right now. We just don't have the resources we need. We don't have the backing, the support.
Exactly.
So
And I think you brought up a lot of good points right there. And just going back a few, and I want to highlight a few of them because I think they're really important. They're really important. What we're doing here at Stay Plugged In as well is first the parental approval, right? I think when you're inside that in circle of esports, it's fantastic, right? When you're in that gaming community, but a lot of times that community shuns the outsiders, right? They might help
mhm,
teach new players, but you said like the pros, that's their own community. Well, the high school players that are almost just as good, well, that's their own community as well, and it's hard for them to get the exposure. And on top of it, the parental approval is like, why aren't you going outside? It's a beautiful day outside. Go play basketball, go play baseball. It's like, well, no, my passion's in esports, right? And
mhm,
I think there's nothing more beautiful when a parent fully backs their child in their
absolutely,
passions, right? And I think
absolutely.
it's not the parents' fault. I think it's just esports is so new and so different than, or at face value, right? I think esports is a lot of very similar
Hmm.
aspects as traditional sports, but it's so different at like face value that sometimes it's hard for people that just don't know anything about it to buy into it, so to say.
Hmm.
And I think, hopefully we can take steps to change those parental approval and, expand communities
Oh
and
yeah,
find where that support system, maybe even develop and explore where those support systems can come from
yeah,
to help
and
bolster the entire community as a whole.
yeah, and there are absolutely steps that can be made there, outreaches, but we'll talk about that later, I'm sure.
Hmm.
But the last thing to wrap up your previous question, as for production in a professional sphere, that's where everything is top of the line. Everything has to be bam, 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 right down the line. It has to be smooth. All of your transitions have to be perfect, and you have to keep the players in mind because these are professionals at this point. They know what they want. They don't want to be waiting around for a super long time, for your match to start. They want to be, get in the game, get going right now, no lapse in time. So it's really hard to balance that production value with what the pros want. But unfortunately, sometimes sacrifices do have to be made both ways.
Yep.
And in the professional sphere, players understand that and are willing to make those sacrifices. It's like, okay, maybe we have to wait 5 minutes for our match to start, whatever, that's fine, because it's a good production sphere, and the pros genuinely like it, especially getting just below the pro level to that semi-professional level with the people who are like really, really, really good and hoping to go pro soon.
Hmm.
Those people are even more willing to work with you on that because the fact that they want that exposure, they want to have organizations look at them and say, I like you, I want to pick you up, and then they have something to work with that has good production quality and a fantastic play experience to it as well.
Exactly. And I think it's a win-win right there with the play experience and the production value because especially these players, they need a resume basically, and there's no, your resume in esports isn't a sheet of paper, especially as a player. It's montages, it's clips, it's YouTube videos, it's a Twitter page with full of content of you playing. And if you have a professional production behind that where you can go and play consistently and have that support system that we were talking about, it just improves everything at that first glance, which is huge for the players to go and get that next level of going semi-pro to pro, or even maybe high school to get a college scholarship playing for a team in the collegiate sphere,
Mhm.
and pursuing your interests and passions there.
And actually, you guys that stay plugged in are also in a very uniquely beneficial situation. Your primary focus is an esport that is just wide open right now, where
Mhm.
it's like you can play in 2 to 3 matches or 2 to 3 tournaments a day if you find the right ones.
Mhm.
And our Rocket League is a very easy game to pick up, put down, especially if
Mhm.
you're a high schooler living at home or a collegiate player who needs to get work done at the same time. So Rocket League is in a very unique space to fulfill all of the requirements for production.
Yeah, and I think that even touches on the stuff that we've been talking about just now with the parental approval and the communities that we're trying to expand. Rocket League's a game that's very easy to watch, right? 3v3,
Oh yeah.
2v2, 1v1, but it's basically cars or like you're playing soccer with cars,
Hmm.
and that's the core of the game. And soccer is something that's very, like, it's the biggest sport in the entire world, so
Oh
it's
yeah.
very easy to recognize and
And
understand. But there's so many other esports that is so hard to pick up. Look at Rainbow Six Siege,
mhm.
CS:GO, Overwatch, League of Legends. Like, I've played esports my whole life, and I've never played League, and I still have no idea what's going on with League. I can kind of
Yeah.
follow it, but it's so hard to,
I
like,
played I
sit
played some
down.
MOBAs, but I've
Yeah,
never really played League seriously, so I can still at
exactly.
least follow it. But
Mhm.
Rocket League is very uniquely positioned in that front, especially. It's the best esport in the world for two big reasons, three big reasons. One, it is the most exciting esport. Period. End of story. It's just 5 minutes of nonstop straight action. And for parents who might be interested in seeing what the pinnacle of Rocket League can look like, I encourage you go look up on YouTube and look up Rocket League World Championships Season 8 Grand Final. You will be blown away at the level of competition and production that they have at RLCS. But the second thing is, it's a game that literally anybody can understand. It is the simplest
Mhm.
concept in the world. You have a ball and two goals. Get it into your
Mhm.
bonus goal.
Mhm.
Soccer. And then that allows for the third thing, which is that it is capable to be watched by anybody.
Mhm.
Anybody can like walk into like okay, maybe a little bit later on in life, but they can walk into a bar, like a sports bar, and turn
Mhm.
this on the TV at like Buffalo Wild Wings or something, and they know what's going on instantly.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's, something that why we do so much of Rocket League here at Stay Plugged In is because for students and parents, it's so easy to pick up and take off from there. But I think the other games, the big games, the tier one esports that have been around for a while as well, I think they're actively trying to bridge that gap, right? Close that gap down to make it easier for everyone to buy in. Because ultimately, Rocket League's fantastic, and like I said, it is one of the best, if not the best. There's an argument there, 100%, for it to be the best esport in the world, from all aspects. But at the same time, there's still so many other games. That's another beautiful thing about esports is that you have a great, you have a hard decision to make of which one you want to play and become the best at. But it's also good that you have so many options.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think as these support systems start to, develop more at the younger ages, you'll see even more emphasis on, okay, how do we explain League of Legends or CS:GO to someone that's never seen a game like this before?
And that is
Um,
very difficult,
yeah,
believe
that
me.
that in itself is a task that could take years to figure out. Um, but yeah, going off that, let's go back. You said you played competitively before. What are some of those skills that you developed or you think you developed playing competitive esports, and how do you use those today in your profession? Like, how does all of those skills translate into becoming something that's very viable in the workforce today, so to say?
Well, it's not optional at all. You have to play professional esports or at least competitive esports in some manner before you can really understand how it works with team dynamics and stuff like that. To really understand how the game works inside and out, to be able to cast it and produce it effectively, you have to do that. That is not optional because it, so let's keep using my primary esport, Rocket League, for example, and I'll touch on battle royales here in a second because I used to be again the Collegiate Battlegrounds Association head of production. But with Rocket League, um, if you don't know what a flip reset is or how it's done or how players do it, then you're not going to have any clue what happens when you see someone do it. If you don't know how a team is supposed to defend against one, you're not going to know, exactly what's going on. If you don't know what a rotation is in Rocket League, then you're not going to have any clue how to talk about the strategy of the game, which is very, very deep, by the way.
Hmm.
Um, and all of those things kind of coupled together to be absolutely critical skills that you need to be able to cast a game effectively. So it's not so much an optional thing for playing a game to cast it. You have to play a game to cast it. You
Hmm.
have to have played a game. I mean, sure, you can watch a couple of videos of a game to be able to and then be like, oh, I get the gist of what's going on. Yeah, we'll talk about it. But at the same time, that's going to stand out to anybody who has ever watched any amount of that game ever,
Hmm.
or played it or anything like that. It is going to be very obvious. And for battle royales, which is another one of my specialties, and other games, it is actually even more so the case. Um, with battle royales, again, my history comes from PUBG, Rocket League, and first person shooters. Um, but with battle royales, it's even more so the case because those games get so complex and there are so many factors to consider all at the same time about where a team's going to move on the map to obtain a strategic position. It's almost like um, a military conflict multiple ways
Hmm.
in motion in front of
Hmm.
you.
Hmm.
And honestly, brushing up on military history is not a terrible idea when you're looking at battle royale.
Yep.
I did it. I
Hmm.
did it. I'm like, okay, small team tactics. What goes on? And
Exactly.
I'm also a veteran, so
Yeah.
I have some frame of reference for that
Hmm.
already. But it it is absolutely critical for you to go in and play these games and learn them and thoroughly understand them
Hmm.
before you can actually talk about them in a professional sense.
Yeah, and I think that statement right there encapsulates the importance of playing the games the right way and correctly, right? You said like you need to learn them thoroughly, right? You don't do that by just picking up a controller and be like, okay, I'm gonna play today and just keep going, right? You have
Mhm,
to strive to become better, strive to learn strategies, tactics, like you said, outside of the game tactics. Think outside the box from a military background.
mhm,
There's so many facets of it to become better. And I think you see that in traditional sports a lot today. You see so much emphasis on what can you do outside the playing field to make yourself better on the playing field. And I think that doesn't get near as much attention in esports. A lot of it is because it's so new and no one really knows how to translate some of those skills over. But as time goes on, as people like us having these conversations, coming out, the work comes to fruition, it's going to improve on itself. But I think it's very important to highlight those aspects of learning the game the right way, thoroughly, but making sure that it's quality over quantity. Because ultimately, that's what's going to make you a better player, and then provide these skills in becoming a caster, becoming a production expert, production
mhm.
manager, and
And
everything in between there.
once you've reached that level, you can't stop. You have to
Exactly.
keep going. You have to keep
Mhm.
learning the new strategies. You have to keep
Mhm.
learning the meta, as we call
Mhm.
it. For any parents who might be watching this, the meta is the meta game, as in like what does your typical game, like one single game,
Mhm.
look like right now, in
Exactly. And
like
that
from
changes.
beginning to end, and
Yep.
that changes radically
Yep.
in some games, slowly in others, but radically in a lot of games.
Exactly. And especially in those games that have, like MOBAs or a game like Rainbow Six Siege with defined characters that, you have a choice going into each round. Um, Once those characters get changed by the balancing team at these gaming companies, then everything changes like that. And being in tune with the meta and staying up to date is just as important. In traditional sports, I think it's a
Mhm,
little bit slower. Like right now, we're seeing a shift in the NFL and in soccer, but it's a shift. But in esports, it is a change. It is you wake up one day and the
mhm,
change is, oh my God, they made this, X, Y, and Z change, and
mhm.
all of a sudden you got to go
and
back and look at everything again.
and typically metas change in professional sports with
Mhm.
like rules changes,
Mhm.
but rules changes in esports are very, very, very uncommon.
Mhm.
In fact, very rare for them to change the actual core components of a game to be able to make adjustments. Like League of Legends, the core rules of the game and the map itself even haven't changed since it was first implemented as a game.
Mhm.
And So how they do it is, the way I like to describe to people is, imagine having a bunch of NFL players, right? Like 40-ish NFL players. Well, that's not even enough to fill up two full teams at the NFL level. Let's just say 60 NFL players, right?
Yep.
And they all have different stats, right? But you have people who can like retune these NFL players at will to have different stats.
Mhm.
So you're gonna go find the ones that are the best to play on each individual team, and you're gonna try and pick the ones in in a draft format
Exactly.
that you would want on your team. That's how MOBAs work.
Mhm.
That's how
100%.
MOBAs work.
Yep. Imagine if, one day you could wake up and make Tom Brady, 6'8" with the arms the size of, boulders, and he can just plow through people, and all of a sudden his game just changes from being a pure pocket passer
Then he could
to
deflate the ball even easier.
Yeah, yeah. Just squeeze it. But yeah, just I think that's a good perspective right there. Is that like at a moment's notice you can change the literal physical nature of any kind of these characters or heroes in multiple different games, which you don't see in traditional sports. And that's another educational component of okay, how do we teach people outside of the community why these games are so complex and why it takes so much mental effort and time to learn these games at a really high level.
Mm.
So I think we got time for one more question, and everything we talked about. We talked about like, okay, where's the holes? What could we improve on to make esports better as an industry and the production quality and the better for the players ultimately, right? That's our number one concern here at Stay Plugged In is what can we do to help the players in anything esports related and outside of esports as well? How can we make them better people? So if you could go back to your high school self, what would you give advice to yourself in and ultimately any high school student as well, in striving to that next level? How do you improve? How would you maybe have changed something or done something a little bit more to put yourself in a better position for the future?
To put myself in a better position for the future, honestly, get a better work life balance, and parents can be very very helpful in that manner. And in fact, they're absolutely critical because let's face it, high schoolers are high schoolers. They're not
Mhm.
going to know how to do that. Like
Mhm.
off the top of their head, they're not going to be like, "Oh, hey, I should do this time, this time, practice at this time, eat at this time,
Mhm.
go to bed at this time." They're not going to just know how to do that. But at the same time, parents can't just order them around. They can't just say,
Mhm.
stop playing games. No,
Mhm.
you have to actually make it so that you're teaching your student athlete, your young student athlete, how to better manage his time.
Mhm.
And that is probably the number one thing I'd go back with myself and actually tell my father to do. Uh, Single dad. Um, because he had no idea what to do
Mhm.
when I first started getting into esports, and this was back in like 2011, 2012,
Yeah.
back when the esports scene was even younger than
Mhm.
it is now, and no one had any clue what to do with this new rising
Exactly.
thing. The League of Legends World Championship had just hit like 1 million views that year, I think.
Mhm.
So it no one had any clue what to do with this, and all of a sudden these esports athletes were no longer becoming they were no longer what the stereotype of them was. They were fit, they were healthy, they weren't some middle-aged loner living in his mom's basement
Mhm.
anymore. They
Mhm.
were actual trained esports professionals
Mhm.
with a healthy work-life balance and who were top of their game and knew how to maintain that balance.
Mhm.
So it's important for parents to impress upon their children how to maintain that balance. So that way they're more successful in the future.
Exactly. And I think that's a great point. And like it really is the industry so new and no one knows what to do with esports that, it isn't necessarily like just lack of responsibility on a parental side or on a guidance standpoint. It's just no one knows what to do. But, ultimately best advice, take the time, help that work life balance. Because I think sometimes people look at gaming as just a, oh, I'm gonna sit back and chill. Like, well, no, if you're really the passion is really to go to that next level and be a pro or be a really competitive player, well, that's work, right? So you still
Mhm.
need a work and a life, and you have to make sure that balance is there, all encompassing. You're still sleeping right, you're still eating right, you're still making sure you're physically active, physically healthy, and mentally healthy. Gaming takes a large toll on your brain and everything encompassing that and the
Mhm.
stress related with it that you have to make sure you sit back and evaluate that you're balancing everything appropriately and you're looking at gaming as work, especially if you're doing it in a highly competitive sense. Um,
Absolutely. And before we wrap up, I'd actually like to give a message directly to parents who might be looking at this. If your kid is looking at playing esports competitively and they are very passionate about this, treat it just the same way as you would any child who is looking at playing football competitively and passionately in high school or any other sport for that matter.
hmm
It takes the exact same amount of effort and the exact same amount of time. And I promise you, if you learn about these games that they're playing, if you learn about them, you'll find that there are rewarding things in there. That there is a lot that they can learn and you can learn from understanding these games.
hmm
Learn what they're doing. Talk to them about it. And then once they tell you, I want to do this in a more serious manner, do everything you can to support them. But
Exactly.
support doesn't necessarily mean just go do it. Like, okay, have free reign. It means impress upon them that there has to be a healthy work-life balance with as is with any profession at all.
Exactly. And I think, ultimately that balance in all aspects of especially a young gamer's life will help them develop skills, maybe to that pro level, maybe to, being a production manager or a podcast host, right? There's so many avenues in esports right now and in the sphere very close to it, tech, right? Technology obviously drives esports. You need a computer, you need an Xbox, right? And there's so many opportunities there that if you develop these passions now and support them in someone else and their passions, it's only going to lead to positive benefits later in life, and they're ultimately going to be successful. But that's all the time we have today. Thank you, everyone, for joining us again. There's much more. All the topics today that we covered are highlighted in depth in a variety of other podcasts and series that we're also developing here at Stay Plugged In. Keegabyte, go ahead, plug yourself. Any concluding remarks?
Uh, Honestly, you can find me on Twitter at Keegabyte. Find me on Twitch at Keegabyte. I am with the Stay Plugged In crew frequently. I am one of their production advisors right now, so you can find me on the Stay Plugged In Discord, which I'm sure you will have with this podcast when it goes up.
Oh, yeah.
I You can find me over at World of Rockets as well. I do a lot with them, United Rogue, MLE. I am basically a large mainstay in the Rocket League community as a community caster. So you can find me any number of places. Yeah, that's all about I have to plug for myself. I don't like talking about myself too much.
Hey, you deserve the credit. Trust me. There's a reason that you help us so much, and we appreciate it. Is because you are that good. So go check out. You ever want casting advice? Look at him. He's fantastic. Obviously, stay plugged in to everything. Stay plugged in. Um, we have a lot of exciting stuff coming out, and we're always going to keep talking. And ultimately, we're here to better the player in all aspects. So if anybody ever has a question, reach out to us. Social medias will be linked below. Just take the time. We'll take the time as well and reciprocate that. But thank you, everybody. Have a fantastic time. Stay happy, stay healthy, and stay positive.